Tonight's story is titled, The Bedroom Where the Lights Turn On by Themselves. At first glance, it's just a normal suburban house. Quiet street trim hedges and windows that catch the sun in the late afternoon. But every house keeps secrets, and this one has a room that refuses to stay dark. The lights inside turn on by themselves, even when the sockets are empty. What begins as a simple inconvenience soon unravels into something much darker. So turn off your own lights, settle in, and listen closely. The house on Elderwood Drive didn't look haunted. It was ordinary in almost every way. Beige siding, green shutters that faded a little under too many summers, a driveway cracked just enough to sprout weeds. The cul-de-sac itself was quiet, the kind of place where mailboxes lean slightly from age, where neighbors wave half-heartedly as they mowed their lawns, where nothing truly dramatic was supposed to happen. For Daniel and Maya Carter, that ordinariness was exactly the point. They had been searching for months, weary of apartment walls that shook with the footsteps of strangers, of elevators that broke down, of parking spaces that vanished like lottery prizes. A house, any house, meant permanence. It meant something for Olive, their 8-year-old daughter, to call her own. The realtor, a woman with the fixed smile of someone who had learned to push past hesitation, had described it as cozy. Maya didn't trust words like that. Cozy meant cramped, meant outdated, meant a fixer-upper disguised as charm. Still, when they pulled up and Olive leaned against the car window, whispering, "This one's watching us," Maya felt her throat tighten. "Don't start, kiddo," Daniel had said, trying for lightness. Haunted houses cost extra. But Olive hadn't laughed. She rarely did when she said things like that. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon polish, a cover for something older, deeper, like paper left too long in an attic. The living room was narrow, the kitchen small but serviceable. The walls carried the faded outlines where picture frames had once hung. Maya trailed her fingers along them, wondering what had been there before. Upstairs, the hallway split into 4 doors. Bathroom, guest bedroom, the primary bedroom to the right, and then the last door, small, tucked almost shyly at the end of the hall. The knob was cool beneath Maya's hand. She turned it. The room was square, almost perfect in its symmetry, with a single window that looked out over the street. A dresser stood pushed against one wall, abandoned but not empty. 2 brass lamp bases sat upon it, cords neatly coiled, sockets empty. The switch on the wall wasn't a normal toggle. It was a dimmer, the slider taped firmly at the bottom with a strip of blue painter's tape. "Why tape it like that?" Daniel asked, poking at it with curiosity. "Old dimmers can buzz," the realtor said too quickly. "Probably nothing." Olive had stepped inside before either of them could stop her. She turned slowly in the center of the room, arms spread slightly, as though she were feeling the air itself. "This is where you wake up," she said softly. "Where we wake up," Maya corrected, but Olive shook her head. "No, just you." They signed the papers a week later. Moving day was chaos. Boxes stacked like fortresses, the sound of tape tearing and furniture legs scraping across new floors. The sun had barely set when they collapsed into their bed in the primary bedroom. Exhausted but giddy, Olive fell asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Maya woke just after midnight. At first, she thought it was a dream, the thin rectangle of light glowing beneath the door across the hallway. But as her eyes adjusted, she knew it was real. That door, the little room with the tape dimmer, pulsed faintly with light. Her bare feet touched the cold floor. She crossed the hallway, each step heavier than the last, and pressed her palm against the door. It was cold, too cold, as though winter had taken up residence inside. She opened it. Both lamps on the dresser glowed, but the sockets were empty. The light was steady, warm, unnatural. Her breath caught, a small sound in her throat. She turned toward the wall switch. The tape was peeled halfway, as though someone had tugged at it with impatient fingers. She slid the dimmer down. Nothing changed. And then Olive's voice came from the doorway, soft, matter-of-fact. "Don't turn them off. She doesn't like the dark." Maya spun, heart racing. Her daughter stood barefoot, eyes wide but calm, staring not at her mother, but at the far corner of the room where the sloped ceiling met the wall. Maya followed her gaze. It was only a corner, a shadow, a crack in the plaster. But something deep in her body reacted, primal, wordless, a step backward that wasn't hers alone, but every ancestor's instinct rising to the surface. "Tell her we're here," Olive whispered. "Tell her we're not the ones from before." And then she walked away, as though her message had been delivered. Maya turned back. The lamp still burned without bulbs, the glow steady and silent. She reached her hand above one of the sockets, hovering an inch away. The moment she did, both lamps blinked out. Darkness slammed down like a hood. Morning brought denial. Daniel blamed wiring. He fiddled with the breaker box in the garage, muttering about mislabeled circuits. Maya searched the cabinets for hidden bulbs, for any logical explanation, and Olive, over her cereal, said, "It's not wires. It's her. She remembers." They both laughed it off, half-heartedly, but Maya felt the words lodge in her chest. That afternoon, while unpacking, she found a shoebox pushed to the back of a high cabinet above the refrigerator. Inside was a folded towel, a cracked leather razor case, and a slip of paper. The note read, "Leave the room as she left it. The lights know how to behave if you don't trouble them. She forgives at 1:12 a.m. Don't watch." The handwriting was neat, almost schoolteacher-like, the kind that belonged to someone precise. At the bottom, in a different pen, someone had scrawled a second line. "She doesn't forgive twice." Maya folded the note with shaking fingers and put it back in the box. That night, she didn't sleep at all. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the glow returned. This time she stayed in bed, staring at the thin trapezoid of light beneath the door across the hall. She told herself not to look. She told herself the note was right. But at 1:12 a.m., the house changed. The air shifted, as though someone had opened a door to a damp cellar. The glow brightened, sharper, almost white. From down the hall came the faint sound of fabric creasing, the sound of a pillow being pressed, smoothed, and then the unmistakable dip of weight on a mattress. Someone had sat down in a room they hadn't furnished, on a bed they hadn't placed. Maya clutched the sheets, staring into the dark, and knew with every fiber of her being that the house wasn't empty. And worse, whatever was in that room had just noticed her. The second week in the house brought routines. Boxes flattened and hauled to recycling. Daniel hammered shelves into walls. Maya scrubbed cabinets with vinegar and baking soda until the kitchen smelled clean instead of covered. Olive wandered the backyard, sketchbook tucked under her arm, sometimes drawing the sycamores that stood like guardians beyond the cul-de-sac. But night refused to be ordinary. At first, it was only the lights. Every night, without fail, the glow appeared under the door across the hall. Sometimes faint, sometimes sharp, always there, and always gone by morning, as if it had never happened. Maya stopped mentioning it out loud. Daniel joked less about wiring. Even Olive, who had been so certain, grew quieter, watching the door with something like patience. On the fourth night, Maya decided she needed proof. She set her phone outside the room, camera pointed at the door, recording. The next morning, she replayed the footage. At 12:16 a.m., the crack under the door brightened. By 12:17, it was glowing steady. Then, just past 1:12, the light flickered, and for a fraction of a second, the shadow of someone sitting on the edge of the bed stretched across the door. The outline was small, slender, female. Maya shut the phone off with trembling hands. Later that day, she met the neighbor across the street. Mrs. Keene was the sort of woman who seemed to belong to a different decade entirely. Silver hair in a bun, cardigan buttoned too tightly, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She arrived at the Carter's door with banana bread and the kind of curiosity that wore perfume. "You're in the Wilkins house now," Mrs. Keene said, her voice dipping slightly on the surname. "Lovely bones. Needs care, of course. That upstairs room," she paused. "Best keep it closed at night." "Why?" Maya asked, pulse quickening. "Drafts," Mrs. Keene said quickly, as if correcting herself. Then she gave a smile too polite to be real. "You'll see." Before Maya could press further, the older woman patted her hand and excused herself. That night, Daniel tried to sleep through it, but Maya lay awake, staring at the clock. At 12:16, she heard it again, the faint, steady creak of mattress springs under unseen weight. By 1:12, her breath was shallow. The sound came clearer this time. The shift of sheets, the low, almost inaudible hum of someone breathing through their nose. She wanted desperately to believe it was Olive sneaking into the room, but when she turned her head, there was Olive standing silently in the doorway of their bedroom, clutching her rabbit. "She's making the bed," Olive whispered. She wanted ready. For who? Maya asked before she could stop herself. Olive shrugged. "For the ones who come back." The next day, Daniel confronted her. "Maya, you're feeding this. Olive's talking like it's normal. We need to shut the room, lock it, whatever." Stop letting her see it. But Maya shook her head. "You didn't see the shadow. You didn't hear her breathing." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's in your head." "Then why does Olive know?" He didn't answer. That evening, Maya took the note out of the shoebox again. She read the neat handwriting until the words felt burned into her skull. "Leave the room as she left it. The lights know how to behave if you don't trouble them. She forgives at 1:12 a.m. Don't watch." Her eyes lingered on the added line. She doesn't forgive twice. On the 8th night, the pattern changed. At 12:16, the light bloomed as usual. At 12:45, though it flickered, the sound of fabric shifted, louder this time, as though the bed were being remade with more force. Then came a knock. 3 gentle taps from inside the room against the wall they share with the hallway. Maya froze. The knock came again, and Olive, standing beside her in the hallway, because of course she was awake too, lifted her chin and said softly, "She's asking if we're staying." Maya couldn't breathe. What do I say? Say yes, Olive whispered. It's worse if you say no. Maya swallowed and forced the word out, barely audible. Yes. The light flickered once more, then steadied, and from within the room came the unmistakable sound of someone sighing in relief. Days blurred after that. Maya started leaving offerings, little things, a folded blanket at the foot of the bed, a vase with water on the dresser. She didn't know why. She only knew it felt respectful. Daniel grew more frustrated, calling it superstition, but he never set foot in the room. And Olive began drawing, page after page of the same figure. A thin woman with long hair, sitting on the edge of the bed beneath a glowing lamp. On the 10th night, something new happened. At 1:12 a.m., the lamps flickered not brighter, but darker. The glow thinned, stretched, as if the light itself were being drained. The corner of the room seemed deeper, more absolute, and then a voice, soft, female, broken like wind through cracked glass. Not them. Maya sat up straight in bed, heart in her throat. The voice came again. Not them. And then the lamps went out, plunging the house into silence, so complete that even the refrigerator downstairs refused to hum. That was when Maya realized something chilling. The lights didn't just come on for comfort. They came on because she wanted to see. And last night, what she saw disappointed her. The days turned brittle, each one snapping into the next. Daniel worked longer hours, staying out of house more often than not. Maya pretended to unpack, though most of the boxes remained stacked like silent witnesses in the garage. Olive seemed the only one who adjusted, wandering the halls as though she'd lived there all her life. But at night, the house owned them. On a Sunday morning, Mrs. Keene found Maya pruning the small hedge by the driveway. The older woman leaned on her cane, eyes darting toward the upstairs window. Has she come yet? She asked without preamble. Maya froze. What do you mean? You know. Mrs. Keene's voice dropped. The lights, the waiting. Maya's throat dried. You've seen it too? Mrs. Keene pressed her lips tight, as though regretting the words. The Wilkins woman, she died in that room. Not in any way that makes the papers. Quietly, waiting for her husband who never came back. She kept the lamps burning every night until she passed. They say she still does. Maya clutched the pruning shears too tightly. And no one told us. Would you have bought the house if they did? That night, Maya told Daniel. He laughed bitterly. So now it's a ghost story? Perfect. We're living an urban legend. But when the clock struck 1:12 a.m., his laughter ended because the lamps didn't just glow. They flared, bright enough that the hallway outside their bedroom filled with golden light. Shadows of furniture they didn't own stretched long across the floorboards. The sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossed the upstairs hall. Daniel bolted upright, eyes wide. Maya whispered, You hear it too. The footsteps stopped outside their door. A pause, then the soft rattle of the knob, as if someone tested the lock that wasn't there. Olive sat up from her mattress on the floor, rabbit in her arms, calm, unblinking. She's checking who's here, she said. The knob stilled. The footsteps retreated. The lights dimmed. Daniel pressed his palms to his face, whispering a prayer he hadn't said in years. By morning, his resolve cracked. We're getting out, he told Maya. Hotel friend's place, anywhere. But Olive shook her head. We can't. She hasn't forgiven yet. The words chilled Maya. Forgiven what? For leaving her alone, Olive said simply, as though it were obvious. That afternoon, Maya went back to the shoebox. She unfolded the note again. Her eyes caught a faint smear of ink at the corner, something she hadn't noticed before. Turning the paper toward the light, she realized it wasn't a smear at all. It was another word, faded, almost invisible. Stay. On the 12th night, the routine shattered. The lamps glowed earlier. 11:59 p.m. Maya hadn't even drifted to sleep yet. She heard them click alive, the air thickening like fog. At 12:30, the sound of humming floated down the hallway. A woman's tune, low and tuneless, almost a lullaby. Daniel grabbed her wrist. Do you hear that? Maya nodded, unable to breathe. The humming grew louder until it was directly outside their door. And then something slid under the crack. A sliver of fabric, a corner of a pillowcase, yellowed with age, pushed gently into their room by invisible hands. Olive got up and picked it up carefully, as though receiving a gift. She wants it made right, she said. She wants the bed finished. Daniel snatched it from her hands. Furious. Enough. This is insane. He stormed down the hallway and flung the pillowcase back into the glowing room. We're done with this. The moment the fabric left his hand, the lamps flared blinding white. A crash echoed through the house, shaking picture frames off the walls. And from the room came a scream. Not loud, worse. Low, drawn out. The sound of a woman realizing she had been abandoned all over again. Olive dropped to her knees, hands over her ears. Maya clutched her daughter, eyes wide with terror. Daniel stood frozen. The color drained from his face. The scream cut off. The lamps went dark. Silence drowned the house. And in the corner of the hallway, etched across the wallpaper in fresh scratches, were 3 words. Not them again. That was the night Daniel stopped pretending. The house grew heavier with each night. By day, sunlight made it seem harmless. Warm walls. The smell of coffee, Olive's crayon scattered across the kitchen table. But once evening fell, every corner thickened, shadows pooling deeper, silence stretching longer. Daniel barely spoke anymore. He avoided the upstairs hallway, slept with a lamp on beside their bed, and jumped at small sounds, a pipe groan, the fridge clicking alive. Maya tried to hold the pieces together, but she knew the house was winning. Olive didn't resist. She welcomed it. She spent hours sitting cross-legged at the threshold of the small bedroom, humming softly, her rabbit on her lap. Sometimes Maya caught her whispering, as though in conversation. When asked, Olive only said, she listens better when the lights are on. On the 15th night, Maya finally entered the room again. The lamps glowed steady, though still without bulbs. The bed, once bare, was now neatly made. A yellowed sheet tucked tight. The pillowcase Daniel had thrown back folded perfectly in place. Her breath shook. Who did this? She whispered. From behind her, Olive answered. She did. She's been waiting. Maya spun, but Olive was in the hallway. The voice had come from inside the room, near the far corner where the ceiling sloped. Maya fled, slamming the door. The next day, Maya confronted Mrs. Keene again. The old woman stood watering her roses, pretending not to notice. What happened in that house? Maya demanded. Mrs. Keene's eyes flicked to the window. The Wilkins woman, she waited for her husband. He went off. War, they said, never returned. She lit those lamps every night until the very end. Said she couldn't forgive him until she saw his shadow come through the door. She died in that room, Maya said. Mrs. Keene nodded, and she still waits. Forgiveness, child, is a cage. Sometimes the dead build it for themselves. That night, at 1:12 a.m., Maya made the mistake of watching. The lamps brightened sharper than ever. The air smelled of scorched fabric. And on the bed, the indentation formed. Not slow this time, but sudden, as though someone had dropped from standing height onto the mattress. Maya's body locked in place. The blanket shifted. A hollow formed, the shape of legs stretching out. Then, clearer than before, a head rose on the pillow. An invisible figure reclined, the motion precise, unmistakable. And then she saw it. For the first time, the shadow appeared on the wall. A woman's outline, long hair spilling, arms folded across her chest. The shadow moved though nothing lay on the bed. Maya's scream caught in her throat. From beside her, Olive whispered, "Don't move. If she sees you, she'll think you came back." Daniel finally broke the silence the next morning. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. "I saw her," he said flatly. "Not just light. Her. The shadow." Maya nodded, tears burning. "Me too. We're leaving. Tonight. I don't care about money, about mortgages. We're not staying another night." Olive looked up from her cereal, calm as ever. "If you leave before she forgives, she'll follow." Daniel slammed his fist on the table, the sound sharp. "Enough. Stop speaking like she's real." But they all knew she was. On the 17th night, the house took control. The lamps lit earlier, 10:45 p.m. The humming began before midnight. The air in the hallway thickened like syrup. Doors swelled in their frames, refusing to close fully. At exactly 1:12, every light in the house flared. Not just the lamps, but the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room. Bulbs they hadn't turned on in days glowed blinding white. And in the upstairs hallway, written across the wallpaper in fresh scratches, appeared a new message: "Stay until he returns." Daniel collapsed to his knees. Maya clutched Olive tight, but the girl only smiled faintly, as though she had been expecting it. The light snapped out. Darkness fell, and from the small bedroom came the sound of weeping. Not a ghostly wail, not a scream, but the raw, human sobs of a woman who had waited too long. That was the moment the Carters understood. The house didn't want them gone. It wanted them to stay until forgiveness came. And forgiveness would never come. The house no longer slept. Every evening the lamps in the small bedroom ignited earlier, creeping from midnight to 11, then to 10. The Carters stopped marking time by clocks and began counting only by the rhythm of the lights. Daniel was unraveling. He spent hours in the garage, tinkering with tools he didn't need, hands trembling as if he could hammer the fear out his chest. Sometimes Maya found him staring at the breaker box, muttering under his breath, daring it to explain itself. "We're prisoners," he whispered once, gripping the metal door. "She won't let us go." Maya didn't correct him, because he was right. Olive, on the other hand, seemed lighter, as though the longer they stayed, the closer she moved toward some secret she had always carried. She spoke of her like a friend. "She's not angry with me," Olive would say. "She just wants me to keep the lamps burning." She says I remind her of someone. That chilled Maya more than the lights ever had. On the 19th night, the house shifted again. At exactly 1:12 a.m., the lamps flared. But this time the light didn't stop at the doorway. It spilled into the hallway, painting the walls with colors that weren't natural. Shadows of furniture that didn't exist in their world, an old vanity, a rocking chair, etched themselves across the wallpaper. Daniel stood frozen at the threshold. "She's showing us the room," he whispered. Maya grabbed his arm. "Don't look." Too late. The doorway deepened. For a breath. The bedroom wasn't theirs anymore. It belonged to another time, another life. A woman sat on the bed, hair long and dark, eyes hollow with waiting. She smoothed the pillow, then lifted her head toward them, her face blurred, flickering between decades. Sometimes young, sometimes old, always grieving. And then she spoke. "You promise." The sound shattered Daniel. He screamed, slamming the door shut, chest heaving. The light cut off instantly, but the echo of her words rattled the air long after. The next morning, Daniel announced he was leaving. "I don't care if she follows. I'd rather die running than stay here." He stuffed a duffel with clothes, his hands jerking like marionette strings. Maya blocked the door. "If you go, it'll be worse." Olive. "I don't care." Daniel shouted, voice cracking. "This isn't a home. It's a tomb." But Olive only shook her head. "She won't let you leave. Not until it's finished." Daniel stormed past them, the moment he touched the doorknob. Every lamp in the house snapped on at once. A deafening hum filled the walls. The knob seared red-hot under his palm, forcing him to drop it with a scream. Across the wallpaper, fresh scratches formed, letters gouged deep. "Stay." Daniel collapsed, sobbing. "We'll never get out." On the 21st night, the house revealed its memory in full. The lamps ignited early, and the air thickened with the smell of dust and old perfume. At 1:12 a.m., the hallway vanished into another time. They saw him, a soldier, uniform torn, boots heavy with mud, standing in the doorway, his face blurred as though unfinished. The waiting woman rose from the bed, arms outstretched, eyes shining with forgiveness that came too late. But when she touched him, he flickered and vanished. Her scream rattled the glass in every window. Maya clutched Olive close, tears streaking her cheeks. Daniel covered his ears, rocking. The house wasn't just haunted. It was replaying the unfinished end of a life, and it wanted them to finish it. That night, Olive whispered as she drifted to sleep. She doesn't want him anymore. She wants me. The 23rd night was a breaking point. The house didn't wait for midnight. By sundown, the lamps upstairs were already glowing, casting their sickly warmth down the hallway. The air carried the smell of iron and wilted flowers. Maya begged Daniel to stay downstairs, but he refused. "We end this tonight," he said, his eyes hollow with sleepless rage. Olive sat calmly on the stairs, rabbit in her lap. She says it's almost time. He's coming. At 1:12 a.m., the house erupted. Every lamp, every bulb, every shadow sprang to life. The walls shuddered with the hum of unseen electricity. The upstairs room transformed. No longer theirs, but the Wilkins bedroom from decades past. Lace curtains, a soldier's trunk at the foot of the bed, a woman sitting waiting, her eyes red-rimmed but alight with desperate hope. And then he appeared. The soldier, boots heavy, face unfinished, as if the house itself couldn't quite remember him. He stepped into the room. The woman rose, arms reached. For a moment, forgiveness hovered in the air like a fragile glass sphere. But then he flickered, shattered, vanished. Her wail tore through the walls. The lamps blazed white, blinding. The wallpaper peeled, revealing gouged words beneath. Stay until he returns. Daniel staggered forward. We can't. He's never coming. He shouted into the roar of the house. He's gone. He's dead. Forgive him, damn you. The room answered with fury. The mattress slammed as though struck by invisible fists. The lamps burst, spraying shards of hot glass. Maya pulled Olive back, shielding her. Please, she begged, let us go. But Olive slipped from her arms. She stepped into the glowing room, unafraid. The light embraced her, wrapping around her small figure like a crown. She says it doesn't matter anymore, Olive whispered. If he won't return, someone else must stay. Her eyes lifted to her parents. Calm, certain, she chooses me. No! Maya screamed, lunging forward, but an invisible wall of heat forced her back, searing her skin. Daniel threw himself at it too, pounding with his fist, but the barrier held. Inside the room, Olive climbed onto the bed. She lay down, head sinking into the dented pillow that had waited decades. The woman's shadow bent over her, merging, folding, until Olive's body and the shape became one. The lamp steadied. The hum died. Silence fell. When the light faded, the bed was empty. No Olive, only the pillow perfectly smooth. For days after, Daniel and Maya searched. Police came, neighbors whispered, but there was nothing to find. The house offered no explanation. At night, though, the light still turned on, always at 12:16, always until 1:12. And now, if you dare to watch, you would see not the waiting woman, but a small girl, hair braided, clutching a worn rabbit, sitting patiently on the edge of the bed. She did not cry. She only waited. Ending. The Carters never stayed long enough to see more. They abandoned the house, leaving everything behind. A for sale sign appeared, and in time, another family came. The house on Elderwood Drive looked ordinary again. Cozy even, but at night, when the lamps turned on by themselves, the neighbors across the street swore they could see a figure in the window. Not the Wilkins woman, not the soldier, a child, waiting. And if you ever find yourself in that cul-de-sac, walking past after midnight, you may glimpse her too, sitting in the upstairs bedroom where the lights turn on by themselves.